Hey there, I'm Tara from Wild Bird Farm. Today we're going to talk all about herbaceous perennials. Perennials that you can start thinking about acquiring now, starting from seed sometime later in July, or thinking ahead to next spring. The great thing about these plants is they're very flexible. Since they're going to come back and get better year after year, you can start them in late summer, early fall, depending on your climate, or you can wait and start them in the springtime.
A herbaceous perennial is a plant that in our Zone 5 dies back to the ground during the cold winter months and pushes new growth once the weather warms. Their roots remain alive and they grow back each year. There are long-lived and short-lived varieties, and I will cover those as we talk about each. Generally, these plants have one big main flush of flowers, and some put on a second flush later in the season. Some of these perennials also have foliage you can use longer into the season. I love perennials, and especially those I can use in the landscape and in my cut flower bouquets. People sometimes think perennials are more expensive than annual flowers, but when you grow them from seed, each plant will probably cost you pennies. Most of these perennials are relatively drought tolerant once established. Many of them dry well and can be used in everlasting arrangements.
Those that I'm going to start from seed, I like to get them started in late summer. So how to figure out the appropriate time to start those perennial seeds is to look at your first frost date. Let's say mine is October 1 for simplicity's sake. Then you need to see how long those seeds need to grow on from the seedling stage before they're ready to be planted out. Keep in mind you want your plants to establish in the ground 4 to 6 weeks before that first frost. So once you have all of that information, it's pretty simple to count back. So if my first frost is October 1, I want them in the ground for 6 weeks, so that would take me to planting out about August 15th. I want my seeds to grow on in their cans about a month from seed, so that means starting them July 15th. So let's run it the other way. I start my seeds about July 15th, giving them a month to mature. About August 15th, they'll be ready to go in the ground. Now make sure you still harden them off. If I plant my plants out August 15th, that'll give me till October 1, a good 6 weeks to get those roots in the ground, kind of staking their claim so they're ready to winter over. And then in the spring, you're going to see them pop back up out of the soil, and they're going to be bigger and better, I've found, each year. All right, I've got a great list for you today, so let's jump in and look at the perennials I suggest starting either this fall or next spring.
First up is the delphinium, one of the true blue flowers in our garden. These vertical spikes of blooms usually have 1, 2, or sometimes even 3 flushes throughout the season. There are different varieties, including Magic Fountains and Belladonna. They are great cut flowers and also look spectacular left in your landscape. Look at that color blue. Delphiniums are long-lived and their clumps grow larger each year. Most of these that you see here are second or third year plants. Next up is feverfew, also known as matricaria. There are different varieties, including singles and doubles, and my favorite comes from Johnny's and is called Tetra White, as shown here. This tends to be a shorter-lived perennial, I would say usually about 3 years, so I like to replant fresh every year or so I have a continuous supply. Next up is lupin, also known as blue bonnets. A popular variety is Russell. You may have seen meadows full of these if they are growing in the right environment. Each plant comes back year after year and puts on growth and shoots up more blooms. Lupin has sometimes been said to be tricky to start from seed, but I have found that if you nick the seed coat and soak, it pops right up. Next up is yarrow, and man, I love this perennial. There are lots of varieties, including summer pastels, Colorado mix, and summer berries. There's also a slightly larger white one called pearl or double diamond. This is a perennial, and it also readily self-sows. I've found some starts outside of my rows this spring. The special and more vibrant colors sometimes tend to revert back to white after a couple of years, so it might be a good idea to refresh your plants if you see this happening. Next up is that little purple flower in the picture. This is anise hyssop, also known as agastache. I think there's lots of different ways to say it. This is great to use as foliage, and the pollinators absolutely love it. Next up is another one of my favorites, Sweet William, which comes from the dianthus family. One of my favorites to grow is called the volcano mix, but even grabbing a $1 packet from the Dollar Tree grows really well for me. In our zone 5, Sweet William doesn't always get quite as tall as I need it for bouquets, and I do find that some plants die off after a winter or two. So again, you'll want to replant fresh seedlings every year or two to keep things looking nice. I have found that these grow great in my unheated hoop house. It has perennial eyes there. We've got 2 left. Are you still with me? Next up is sea holly or eryngium. This comes in shades of blue and white, also called glitter sea holly. It is extremely drought tolerant and is an excellent cut and dried flower. Last, but definitely not least, is the perennial scabiosa, also known as pincushion flower. This variety is the Fama series, which comes in white and bluish purple. This is another favorite. The blooms are 2 to 3 inches across, and it pushes up new flushes of blooms from late spring through the summer. This is great for wedding work. I would consider this a 2 to 3 year perennial, so again, you'll want to plant new starts to keep the flowers coming year after year.
As far as for me, I am definitely starting perennial scabiosa from seed. I'm going to be starting some different varieties of feverfew from seed. And then this summer, earlier, I ordered some delphinium plugs. So those are already out in the field. So those are the things I will be starting. In past years, I've started a lot of yarrow. I have that coming back now, good big rows and drifts of that, so I'm not planning to start any of those.
Here's a list of everything we've talked about today. I have started each one of these from seed. You can also find some of these as bare root or starts or even gallons in your local garden center.
That wraps things up for me. I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know in the comments below what you're interested in growing next year.
Until next time, flower friends, happy gardening.